So there's an interesting book, a little perplexing. I'll show it to you. It's very short. It's about 18 pages, and it was written as a. It's sort of it's interesting. Like today, you would wage a religious battle on the internet. Recently there was I wrote about it yesterday in my email. Recently there was a significant rabbi in Israel whose books are widely read and is a halachist, yeah, religious Zionist, one of the leaders of religious Zionism, and he appeared on a panel of many people, but one of them was a Reform rabbi, and the attacks on him were vociferous attacks, and he didn't engage in the battle, but he did release a video or two of him speaking and just kind of talking about why he did it. And he launched a campaign, Study Torah. But right, if you go back, before the internet, before obviously there were newspapers, but where do how do the scholarly, how do rabbis argue with each other? The answer, of course, is books. They write books against each other, and they're scholarly, and they write them in Hebrew, and they write them pretty fast, which is interesting. So if you think about it, right, the Hamburg Bezdin, the Hamburg Temple's book, pro-reform of Tshuvot, of Responsa, called Noga HaTzedek, right, was written in 1918. Basically the same within a year. The rabbis of the Hamburg Bezdin issue a book, the Eile Divrei Habrit, is the words of the covenant, against that. So right after that, 1819, there's a pamphlet called Cherev Nekom Nikmat. Cherev Nikamat Nekom Brit. All these things are plays on biblical phrases, and these are very scholarly folks who know Tanakh in and out. You can tell from their writing, and they know Chazal in and out. It doesn't matter if in 1819, even if you're a reformer, you know I have a tremendous amount of Torah knowledge. So the way they write is very rabbinic. Rabbinic writing is very flowery. It uses phrases constantly from the rabbis and from the Torah. And all of these titles are those things. Eile Divrei Habrit is Cherev Nekom Nikmat, Cherev Nikmat Nekom Brit. Right, the rabbis called it Eile Divrei Habrit. These are the words of the covenant, meaning, this is the covenant. You can't break the covenant. So what book does he? This is a reformer. His name is Meir Israel Breslau. And there's actually a nice, there's some articles about him online, not so easy to find. I didn't find any articles about this book, really. Although there's a fairly large book in Hebrew on the early reformers by Moshe Pelly from University of Florida. But it's not so easy to find the book online. But So this pamphlet was written in response to Eile Divrei Habrit, right? And he calls it Cherev, the sword. Nikamat means the vengeful sword that will avenge the covenant. But it's sort of a play. In other words, he's referring here to Eile Divrei Habrit, to that book that was written by the Hamburg Bezdin. And he's basically saying, I'm fighting against you. So you have back and forth and back and forth. He doesn't put his name on it, which is funny. Tuf Kuf Ayin Tes, 1819. I think it's also published in Dessau. I assume the same publisher as Noga HaTzedek. And what does he begin with? Well, first of all, let's see the front page here. So this is interesting. I got this off of Hebrew Books. Now, Hebrew Books is a pretty traditional site. And a lot of it was scanning in of one of the big Lubavitch Rebbe's libraries, one of the big libraries of the, I think maybe fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, and you can see Yosef Yitzchak Lubavitch, That's what it's scanned in from. I'm not sure what this is. Toelet. Toelet usually means purposeful or has a purpose. So it's interesting that this book, clearly a pro-reform book, but very early on is in that library. And so it's funny the way he writes this. About 3/4 of the book is this sort of poetic, rabbinic, it's all like as if you're giving an introduction, as if you're sort of making a declarative introduction to what you're going to say by using language from Tanakh that's very poetic, with all kinds of references. That's 3/4 of the book is that. The last quarter of the book is basically citing sources from halachic sources, pro changes in the prayer and pro instruments. Because those are the issues at this moment. They had already, the Hamburg Temple is already, I think, being built or built, and they've issued a prayer book in the vernacular. So he begins with this Gemara from Yuma, and you sort of ask yourself, what's he doing here, right? Why is he writing it the way that he writes it? So he says, Tanya, we learned it in Braita, you have to love the Lord your God. What does that mean? That the name of God should be loved through you. If a person studies and they serve the wise and they do their business faithfully, what do the people say about them? Happy is the one who taught them Torah. Happy is the rabbi who taught them Torah. But woe is to the creatures. They say, woe is to the creatures who didn't study Torah. And this person who studies Torah, Ra'u kamanaim derachav. See how nice is his ways, how polite are his ways. Kama mitukanim ma'asav. How refined are his actions, right? Here the Gemara is talking about if you are honest in your business and you're seen as a scholar, people look at you and they will say, how refined is this person? Allah b'katuv omer. You are my servants, Israel, and in you I will take glory. Do you make a kiddush Hashem? But but somebody who studies Torah and they don't do business faithfully, honestly, and they don't and they're not nice. They don't talk nicely with people. Very interesting. What do the people say about them? Woe is to this person who studied Torah. Woe is to his father who taught him Torah. Woe is to his teacher who taught him Torah. This person who studied Torah, see how bad his deeds are. See how gross his distasteful are his character. And about him, it says that my name has been cursed, has been desecrated. Right. So it's not a coincidence that the whole book begins with this Gemara, right? Because in a certain sense, what an early reformer who knows this much Torah, who on some level is quite religious, who is religious, but wants to, is I mean, you can imagine what they're sensing, right? They're sensing, okay, the Jews, it's already been the Haskalah, it's already been the Enlightenment. The Jews don't know what they're, davening. They don't feel like it's noble to be a Jew. They feel like it's backward. So, to introduce prayer in German and the organ in the shul, and dressing like a noble German, it doesn't seem crazy, really. He clearly sees the whole Hamburg Temple movement. And this is not the radical end of it, that wants to move Shabbos to Sunday, but he clearly sees the whole early reform movement as something that it's there to sanctify God's name. I mean, there's no question about it. Everybody here means well. Everybody, nobody's like, I wish I could go out on Friday night and, go to the opera instead of going to shul. That's not what it's about for them at this point. These are learned people. I think it's about, I think it's not that different than the struggles that we have today. I think over questions of, what kind of Jews should we be in the world? That's my sense. Okay, so he writes this, and he quotes, he throws a quote in here from Rabbi Meir ben Turdas Halevi. I'm not sure exactly who that is. Sounds like a medieval Sephardic rabbi. Let's see who it is. Died in 1406. Folder, wow. And he served as the rabbi of Frankfurt. Interesting. Right. Let's see. So he says, "Ma tikvat adam l'shloach igrotav b'katzeh haaretzot." Why should a person send their writings to, out? V'ligdor pratzot. Do it to shore up the breaks in the fence. So adam mumo, and to give musar to people. L'fkod alav ashamo, and to rebuke people. You should also rebuke yourself. Okay, so this is a book of rebuke, right? Who is it rebuked toward? It's a rebuke toward the Orthodox rabbis of the Hamburg Besden, Tafkuf Ein Tas. And then this is funny, like he throws in, now it's very common when you put the date in a sefer, in a Hebrew book, to quote a pasuk, and one of the words is larger, and that word is the date for the book being written. Right? This would be Nun is 50, Mem is 40, that's 98. 98. So this is, right, Tafkuf Ayin Tes is, now the other option is that it's the whole verse here that adds up to this. Tafkuf Ayin Tes, which would be 5,679, 1819, 5,670. So 679. So probably if you add this up, you would get, I'm sorry, 579. So do you get 579? I don't think so. 100, 6, 7, 12. This is 98. That's 200. This is 61 to 61. And then to 81. And 60 is 300 and 441, and pays 80. It's 500. That doesn't work. So it's chinam, which is, it's got to be just this word, which is 98. So why is he? So I don't know. I'm really not sure. Unless this isn't the date, unless this is just a phrase that he wants to put in. And what he means by it is that there's no charge for the book. That's also a possibility. So this phrase means v'yatza chinam ein kasef, and it's referring to a servant, a Jewish servant. I'm sorry, a non-Jewish, Jewish or non-Jewish servant that you hit. If you hit him, he goes out free.
Well, that's right. It will be 98.
Yeah. So what could that be a reference to, right? That's not, right? Ayin is 70.
70. Yeah.
It's not a secular date. So it could be it's not a date. Could be it's just v'yatza chinam ein kasef, and that it's a play on a few words. Number one, the word chinam means free, right? And that's kind of, right, he's on the side of sort of freedom. And v'yatza chinam ein kasef is referring to a servant who's hit, and therefore goes out free. Now, who's the hit? Who's the one who's been hit, who's going out free, right? So he's been attacked by Eile Divrei Habrit, by the rabbis of the Hamburg Besden. Maybe what he's saying is, I've been punched in the mouth by them, and I am a reformer. I'm pro freedom. It's interesting. I don't. I'll see if I can get my hands on this Hebrew book about the early reformers. Maybe somebody speaks about it, but Schneur Lyman would be the right guy, although it's hard to get in touch with. But he's a believer that the front pages of books tell you everything. Hativa Hashem Latovim V'Leisharim B'Libo Tam, right? And then he throws in another pasuk: God is good to the good and to the straight in their hearts. So, okay, right. So what he's trying to say is, on some level, he's trying to say, I'm right. And 3/4 of the book is trying to say that in very poetic words. I'm going to give you some sense of it. It says, Zot ladat ki hamichtav halaz nidfas l'chavod HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'torasa. You need to know that this letter is being written for the honor of God and His Torah. V'lo chas v'shalom l'kanter o l'hachis. It's not there to anger or to kanter means to prosecute any Jew. Gam lechavod kihilatenu Beit Yaakov, and it's there for the honor of our congregation Beit Yaakov. Now, I don't know if the Hamburg Temple called itself Beit Yaakov. Havdil beina or beina choshech, to separate between light and darkness. Now, what you'll notice about his language is the way that he writes. If you didn't know who's writing it, you'd think it's the Hamburg Bezdin writing it, or the Chassam Sofer 50 years later writing it. It sounds like the way that the Orthodox write against the Reform, but he's writing pro-Reform this way, right? To separate between light and darkness, to tell you that those enemies of ours are small in number, and they're wicked. Asher nichshlu b'tot, and they have tripped up, v'yatzu lariv, and they've embarked on a battle on a quarrel. These are all quotes from Tanakh, by the way. That's what all these things are. Chozim masaot shav u'meduchim. They see a vision that is false. The whole congregation is holy. This also, this is from Korach. And it's a very small number, those who have tripped through those who are trying to trip them up, who dwell in darkness. Now, I don't know if he's referring to the rabbis of the Hamburg Bezdin, or if he's referring to reformers who are a very small group who are more radical. And he's trying to say they're very small. I'm not exact, it's hard to know. Samim or lachoshech, v'hilayla. They place light in darkness, but it's night. But tirmas kochai seyar, that's when all the wild animals come out. V'al pihem gam zarim ba'u, and through their words also foreigners have come, v'ashchisu and achlat Hashem, and destroyed the inheritance of God, hatov, which is good. For them, panav alehem l'hayar lehem at the derech. I'm going to light the way for them. Me'ofel mechoshech ene ivrim tirena. They'll see through the dark. Tizrach Hashema she'asefun. This is all quotes from Barchi Nafshi, from a psalm about the sun rising. Masa hatzdaka shalom, an act of righteousness is peace. So like, so the language he uses is language like of, I'm calling if he's talking about the Hamburg Bezdin, he sees them as big sinners. And maybe he legitimately sees that because, they have written against, in his mind, people who are justified. Saying bad things about people who are justified. And then he says, or maybe he's trying to write about, again, more radical reforms. I'm not sure. It says, to the sanctified, this is also a quote from Tanakh, to the holy ones who are in the land. Tehei shalosh rigza eretz. There are 3 who have created anger in the land. Shlosha eila asher halu et shmotam beit barzel. The 3 who have put up their names. The 8 barzel. 8 barzel means an iron pen. That refers to the printing press. V'oferet, 8 barzel v'oferet. Oferet is carbon. Tachat patshegen haktav. That's of course a quote from Megillas Esther. Every line is a quote from Tanakh. They've written this letter. Masa ta'atuim asher kinu b'shem moda. They have called their letter a moda, something informational. Lahodia, to make known, la'ein kol chatot pimu. But it's really to make known their sin to everybody. Now, if we look in the front of the Hamburg Bezdin letter, I wonder if it says moda, that it's let's just look at that. And I'm not sure why he thinks it's 3. Like, who are the 3? There were 3 things that they spoke about. But were there 3 people? Oh, 3 is the Hamburg Bezdin. That's what it is. The Bezdin is 3. Yeah. That's what it is. This is the Hamburg Bezdin's book. So that's who those are the 3 that he's referring to. Let's see who they were. Let's see if they're signed here. Yeah, here they are. So, right, these are the 3 members of the Hamburg Bezdin. Rabbi Meir Prague, Rabbi Yaakov of Hamburg, and Rabbi Michael Speer of Hamburg. So that's what when he refers to the 3 that have put their names on the front of that which has been printed, that's what he's referring to. So you'll see what's sort of shocking about it is the language with which he writes about the Hamburg Bezdin. You would think, again, I mentioned this before, but if you just had it, taken out of context, you would think this is somebody writing against the reform. I mean, he seems to call them sinners. Now in his mind, maybe they are because they're, sort of talking Lashon Hara about him. It's so reminiscent of today, of sort of the fights with Orthodoxy today, or of what happened, this past week. Here's this rabbi, sat with a Reform rabbi, and he got accused of being too liberal. And so much so that everybody's writing against him. He's a big tzaddik. Like, why is everybody? That's very, on the some people would say, oh, no, it's terrible. With the Reform, we're doing exactly the right thing. And other people would say, no, it's a tremendous sin you're doing. You basically, taking away all of these wonderful books from and it's tzaddik. And, so how you see it is everything, right? Okay. All right. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. I will. I'll be here Monday. But Tuesday, I'm going to be away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.